You are 22, in a windowless room, copying a diagram of a feedwater pump by hand. It pays $37 an hour. 14 years later, the same room pays $180,000 a year. One plant, no transfer. The federal license in your name is valid inside exactly one building on Earth. Take the same job 3 states over, and you begin again from nothing, whatever you were the week before. This is every level of a nuclear plant operator's career, and what it costs to climb. If you want to see how these jobs really pay, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. We start at level 1, the non-licensed operator. The non-licensed operator earns $37.90 an hour, roughly $78,800 a year. Most of them are 21 to 26. You do not sit at the controls, you walk. Miles of concrete corridor a shift, a radio clipped to your chest, and a paper round sheet in your hand, reading gauges that have not moved in 9 years, and writing down that they have not moved. You line up valves by hand, in order, out of a procedure, with a second person reading each step aloud before your glove touches anything. The plant is loud in a way that flattens conversation, and warm in a way that never quite becomes hot. Getting in requires a high school diploma, a federal background investigation, and a passing score on the Plant Operator Selection System test. A great many of them leave inside the first 2 years, and it is almost never the science that pushes them out. It is the rotation. Here is what nobody tells you. The job is not built to find out whether you are clever. It is built to find out whether you will perform the same 900 steps in the same order on your 40th night shift, when nothing has happened and nothing is going to happen. The ones who can do that get offered the thing that rearranges their life. Here is the mechanism that runs this entire trade, and once you see it, every strange thing about the job makes sense. A reactor operator license is issued by the federal government to one human being, tied to one unit at one station, not to a company, not to the industry. The examination is written around that specific control room, with its specific panel layout, its specific pump numbering, its specific emergency procedures. 2 plants 40 miles apart can be built from different designs by different vendors in different decades, and the license from one is worth nothing at the other. Consider what that removes. There is no headhunting, because there is nobody to hunt. Nobody calls you with an offer, because the offer would mean 2 years of retraining before you were useful. You cannot walk into an office and say you have another opportunity, because you do not have one, and everybody in the building knows it. Your leverage is not weak, it does not exist. And the disagreement you had on a night shift in your 3rd year does not blow over, because the man you had it with will be sitting 4 feet away in the year 2040. The license class operator earns $44.60 an hour, roughly $92,700 a year. Most of them are 25 to 34. You are pulled off shift work and put in a classroom for roughly 18 months. Thermodynamics, reactor theory, radiation protection, plant systems drawn from memory on a whiteboard until you can produce any loop in the building without notes. Then the simulator, which is a full-size replica of your control room, in the same colors, with the same switch handles, where instructors break things on purpose, while a camera records what your hands do. Getting in requires a supervisor nomination, 2 years of walking the plant, and a passing grade on the entrance examination. Only a small share of the people who want a seat in that classroom are given one in any given year, because the class size is set by how many licensed operators the station will need, not by how many want to go. Here is what nobody tells you. The examination is not the hard part. The hard part is that you are being watched for 2 years by people who already know whether they want to be locked in a room with you, and that judgment is made long before the written test. Which is why the man who scores highest is not always the man who gets handed the keys. The reactor operator earns $52.30 an hour, roughly $108,700 a year. Most of them are 28 to 40. You sit at the panel. On a normal shift, you will move perhaps a dozen switches in 12 hours, and you will announce every one of them out loud before you do it, and somebody will repeat it back to you before your hand moves. Nothing about the work is fast. The skill being paid for is the ability to notice that a reading is 30 units off where it sat last Tuesday, and to care about it at 4 in the morning on the 5th night of a rotation. Getting in requires passing the federal written examination, an operating test on the simulator, and a walkthrough with an inspector at the panel. A meaningful share of candidates do not finish the license program, and a fair number of those who do fail the medical or the requalification cycle later, which arrives every 2 years for as long as you hold the license. Here is what nobody tells you. The proudest thing most reactor operators will tell you about their career is a shift where absolutely nothing happened, and they will describe it in detail, because keeping a plant boring is the entire craft. The next license is the one that changes what your signature means. The senior reactor operator earns $63.40 an hour, roughly $131,800 a year. Most of them are 34 to 48. You can now direct the manipulation of the core rather than perform it. You approve the procedure before it starts, you sign the tag out that takes a pump out of service, and when the plant is starting up or shutting down, the sequence runs because you said it runs. The written examination is longer, the simulator scenarios are worse, and the federal inspector spends more time on the questions you cannot answer than the ones you can. Getting here requires an accumulated operating history, a second full license class, and a company recommendation that survives review. Plenty of qualified reactor operators never sit for the senior license at all, and the reason they give is almost always the same, which is that the pay difference does not buy back what the responsibility takes. The senior license makes you the person the government talks to. When an inspector arrives unannounced at 2 in the morning, your name is the one on the log, and you answer for a decision made by someone else on your shift. That signature is also the last one you own before the job stops being about the reactor at all. The schedule deserves its own explanation, because it is the thing that empties out the bottom 2 rungs. A licensed crew works rotating 12-hour shifts, typically 2 or 3 days, then 2 or 3 nights, then several days off, cycling forward through the calendar, with no regard for weekends, holidays, or the school year. You will work Christmas. You will work your own birthday. You will be awake and sharp at 4 in the morning in February and asleep at noon in July, with foil over the bedroom window. Add the refueling outage, which arrives roughly every 18 months to 2 years, and turns a quiet plant into a construction site of 1,000 contractors working around the clock for a month or more, with the operating crews carrying long stretches of overtime through the whole of it. The money in this trade is real, but a good part of it is paid to people for being awake when the rest of the country is not. The shift manager earns $73.10 an hour, roughly $152,000 a year. Most of them are 40 to 55. This figure sits at the top edge of what the Federal Wage Survey records for licensed operators, and it gets there the same way it always does, through outage overtime and shift differential stacked onto a senior license. You run the crew. 11 or so people, 1 plant, 12 hours, and every decision on that shift belongs to you, until you hand it to the next manager at the turnover table. Getting here requires a senior license held in good standing, years of shift experience, and the willingness to be the person who says stop. A number of senior operators are offered this seat and turn it down, because the seat means you no longer touch the panel and you no longer get to blame the panel. Here is what nobody tells you. In an emergency, your first job is not to fix the plant. Your first job is to keep 3 people from fixing it at the same time in 3 different ways. There is a reason that lesson is written the way it is written, and it was paid for in Pennsylvania. Just before 4 in the morning, on the 28th of March, 1979, at 3 Mile Island Unit 2 near Middletown, Pennsylvania, feed water pumps stopped delivering water to the steam generators. Pressure rose in the reactor coolant system, and a relief valve at the top of the pressurizer opened as designed. Pressure came back down. The valve did not close. The indicator in the control room told the crew the valve was shut. It was reporting the signal sent to the valve, not the position of the valve. Coolant escaped as steam for hours. As emergency cooling water flooded in, the pressurizer level climbed, and the crew, trained to avoid filling that vessel solid, throttled the emergency cooling back. The core uncovered, and about half of it melted. Nobody in that room was careless, and nobody was untrained. They were reading an instrument that answered a different question than the one they were asking. Every requalification cycle in the country still carries the shape of that morning. The operations manager earns $86–70 an hour, roughly $180,300 a year. Most of them are 45 to 60. This number sits above the top of the Federal Operator Wage Survey, and it should, because the role is no longer an operator role. It is a salaried management position over every licensed crew at the station, and the pay reflects accountability for the operating license of the plant itself rather than hours at a panel. Getting here requires a senior license in your history, a record clean enough to survive federal scrutiny, and a tolerance for meetings. Hardly any operators reach this seat, and a good many of those who do describe the promotion as the day they stopped enjoying the job. Here is what nobody tells you. You spend 20 years learning a building well enough to run it, and then you are promoted into a role where you are graded on paperwork about the building. There is one more way this ends, and it is the only escape from the property line. The exit is the license itself, used sideways. Vendors who build simulators, engineering firms writing procedures, and the industry training organizations all hire former senior operators, and a small number go to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as inspectors, walking into other people's control rooms at 2 in the morning. The pay is comparable and sometimes better. What it actually buys is a passport, because a man who has been legally welded to one building for 20 years is suddenly allowed to work anywhere. And that is the answer to what decides who gets to the top of this ladder. Not the examination, which is beatable. It is whether you can spend 2 decades in one windowless room with the same 11 people and still be someone they will tell the truth to at 4 in the morning. Non-licensed operator, $37.90 an hour, walking a paper round sheet through a warm corridor. Licensed class operator, $44.60, 18 months in a classroom. Reactor operator, $52.30, announcing every switch out loud. Senior reactor operator, $63.40, signing the sequence. Shift manager, $73.10, keeping 3 people from fixing the same problem at once. Operations manager, $86.70, accountable for a license that belongs to a building. Most trades pay you more the further you travel. This one pays you for staying exactly where you are, and charges you the same amount for it. Next, every level of a boilermaker.